Good evening, everyone, and for those of you watching live or the replay, my name is Josh O'Connell. I am with the New Haven Pride Center, serve as co-president, and wear a number of hats, but today I'm serving in the hat of the Bi Plus Programming Advocate. I host our monthly social, currently virtually meeting every fourth Saturday from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Through the Pride Center, as well as take part in the Bi Plus library program that we're doing, where we're adding books every month, focusing on Bi Plus topics for access for those who visit the center. But today I'm actually happy to host a talk with Zachary Zane, who's a Bi Plus advocate and writer. If you haven't read his writing, I highly recommend that you do so after our program today, because he has a very diverse set of topics that he covers, everything from an advice column at Men's Health called Sexplain It. But actually, let me just pass it over to Zachary, and want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and the writing that you do.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a writer, speaker, and activist. And as you said, Josh, so I have a sex column at Men's Health called Sexplain It. I also have another sex and dating relationship column at Queer Majority called Zach and the City. I don't necessarily love the title, but it's there to stay. And I've written for, Washington Post, Rolling Stone, Playboy, Cosmo, just a bunch of other places as well. And typically I cover issues pertaining to bisexuality, pansexuality, polyamory, sex positivity, kink, sex education, and all of that good stuff. So that's me.
Fantastic. So first off, we were structuring this as more of a conversation than anything else. So as part of that conversation, we want to invite those of you who are watching to actually submit your questions. If you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, you should be able to submit your questions, and we'll be able to see them right on our screens. So that way we can address them during the conversation. We have a few questions that have already been submitted previously to this live broadcast being started. So we're going to start with those topics and see where that gets us. And our goal is to cover a wide array of things over the next hour. So why don't we start with something that's kind of it's a bit beyond a Bi Plus topic, but there's certainly a Bi Plus aspect to it, which is what we're dealing with sort of in the world right now with COVID-19. And it's important to note that Zachary's not a mental health expert or a therapist or anything like that. However, as an advice columnist, he certainly has seen his share of things that maybe he can provide some insight on. The Bi Plus community usually talks about mental health as an issue that certainly can pop up as an issue, and finding ways to connect and to find people that they can discuss their issues with, and community is a part of that. Just sort of starting with the COVID-19 aspect of things, though, which is an extra layer of stress, right? So whatever stressors you already have, you now have this. And you're based in the Northeast. I'm based in the Northeast, so we certainly had a difficult time of it. What are some things that you've been doing as far as your ways to sort of keep mentally fit and just sort of stay focused?
I think the main thing I've been doing is really keeping a schedule. Especially, I think a lot of people are unemployed right now or partially employed, and with that, it just kind of makes it tough, especially, with going on. You just scroll down and scroll through Twitter or Instagram all day, and before you know it, you go into this black hole with everything that's going on. So I think having a schedule of what you're doing. I've been doing home workouts, and even though I absolutely loathe them, I really try to stick to them, again, for my mental health and everything like that. Also finding the balance between talking to friends and not talking to friends. I think in the beginning of COVID, everyone got super excited with Zoom and was like, oh, I'm going to FaceTime my mom and then have a Zoom drink with my friend, and then I'm going to have a Zoom and by the end of it, I'm done with FaceTiming and Zoom for the most part, at least for me personally. I feel like I end up focusing too much on, how am I appearing? Am I smiling? Am I being engaging? Versus okay, there was a reason why I used to do phone calls and not FaceTime for my friends and family instead, and doing that. So not necessarily overbooking yourself socially, which kind of can seem ironic right now considering our social life is very limited, but I guess not overbooking yourself virtually, socially, if that makes sense.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because actually when you think about social activities, you can, if you choose to, let's say you're at a bar with 50 other people, you can blend into the background and not have to be on 100% of the time and sort of take a break. Whereas I think with Zoom calls, FaceTime, that kind of thing, you're kind of just always present, right? So you have to be a bit more alert and active, and it almost can be more wearing than an actual social activity going out physically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you end up having the same conversation repeatedly. My mom and I will do constant check-ins maybe every other day. It's like, how are things doing? And we're like, well, not great, but I guess it's fine. And I'm socially isolating and I'm social distancing, and I have absolutely no news for you, and you have absolutely no news for me. And isn't it crazy what's going on in the world right now? So those conversations, we still do these check-ins, but we do maybe, it's 3 or 4 minutes if we have nothing really exciting to say, and not feeling obligated just to speak longer because we're alone, whatever it is.
Makes perfect sense. So now taking sort of the COVID aspect out of it, there are certainly within the Bi+ community certain challenges that I get when I talk with people. They tell me that are issues such as just sort of the loneliness, not feeling like that there's other people in their situation, or not knowing how to reach them. Just sort of the ability to sort of work through the standard issues that we sort of see in the Bi+ community, bi erasure, biphobia, having people tell you it's a phase, if it's, because they think that's what it is, all those types of things. So let's talk about the biphobia, bi erasure aspect of things a little bit. How do you normally, when you sort of see a bi erasure situation going on in your work, how do you normally work to try to address it?
Is this in like an IRL setting where someone says something, or is this something that's done? Well, how am I addressing this?
Let's start with the real life setting, and like if you see someone and there's a conversation, it happens. What would be your normal? What do you look at, and what do you try to accomplish?
I address it. I'm now to the point where I am famously, that's audacious, but I'm famously bisexual. Let's say that. So that is, if you know me and you know what I do, then I definitely talk about this, and you're not going to say any biphobic shit in front of me anymore. But, back in the day when I get this, or around new people, and I'll meet new people, and it comes out that I'm bi, and they love to be like, oh, I identified as bi in college. I'm like, I know exactly where the fuck you're going with this, and I don't want to hear it right now that you're gay now. Like, I think one thing, I address it point blank, and I really still have set a balance between what I feel comfortable sharing about my personal life, because sometimes what ends up happening is they will make you justify your bisexuality when you say, I'm actually bisexual, and I don't like that you said that. And they're like, well, when's the last time you slept with a woman, or when's something along those lines, and they ask you to pull up the sexual resume. And I can feel comfortable doing it because I also overshare my life professionally, but you should never feel obligated to do so. And I think one thing that helps, and it's so shitty, but like you have to be honestly so confident in your response. Mm-hmm. It's weird. When I was confused about my bisexuality when I was much younger, and people would ask me, so are you gay? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think I'm bi. And when I would say I think I'm bi, I feel like that opened up so much opportunity for them to suddenly be like, oh, you think so? Okay, so here's why you're actually not. But it's a combination of saying it confidently and saying it, then there's the irony of like doth protest too much, where I feel like you see some people like, no, I'm really bi. And even if you are really bi, if you make it seem so aggressive, like it's almost like you have to find that middle ground. And it's so unfortunate where that's the only reason that they would believe you. But you say things calmly, no, I'm actually bisexual. And even if I hadn't had sex with a woman recently, I'd still be bisexual. Right. And answer their things in short, sweet, concise sentences in a way that lets them know I actually don't enjoy this conversation at all. And that's how I'm able to approach these topics. But I think it is good to address it if you see or someone says something biphobic in real life, and also not feeling obligated to at the same time. If there was a point where I felt like I was more, I don't want to say aggressively bisexual, that's not the word, but every time I went out, I really made a point to discuss this and discuss me. And I was wanting to change everyone's minds. I was very in that mindset. And then I went through a phase where I'm like, I'm exhausted of having this conversation. I'm exhausted of the conversation turning to me about my life and my sexuality with every single new person I meet. So if you have the stamina and if you are in the mood, I think it behooves you, it behooves the community to stand up and explain why whatever it is that they're saying is biphobic or bi-erasure, and here are some ways to be more inclusive of the bi community. But at the same time, don't drive yourself nuts. Like do what you need to do for your own self-care.
I think that's really, really good advice. And it's interesting because when it comes to these types of topics, for me, I've been in a relationship personally for 14 and a half years. So a lot of people just presume because I've been with my partner as long as I have that I'm in one box, and they don't realize I'm not in that box. And so I've had interesting, some people talk about sort of you come out multiple times because you have to constantly, sort of address the issue. And I had a friend who didn't realize that I was bi. And when I said I was bi, I had this interesting reaction where he got excited. And so I'd never had that one before. And I was like, well, if you can just help me make sure that the rest of the room understands this too.
Also, in that positive note, when I started talking more openly about my bisexuality with random people I met, whatever it is, at bars and social setting, my parents as friends, like whatever it was, you'd be surprised how often suddenly other people are like, oh yeah, I guess I'm bi. Like it's something where they haven't necessarily embraced the label, but they're like, yeah, I slept and I'm attracted to the same gender or the different gender, whatever it is. I'm like, oh, you're actually 100% bisexual. You don't identify as such, but you meet more of those people, and then you'd also meet people be like, oh, I'm 100% bi. I actually just don't talk about it as much. And so that was, I think a positive experience of doing this when you actually start talking about it more. At the end of the day, we represent the majority of the LGBTQ community, and like we are out there. We're just not necessarily as vocal about it. So when you're more vocal about it, you end up meeting and having really cool conversations with other bi plus people.
And then I see what a lot of other people in the community have been slowly doing, and I see your shirt, of course, today, is there's the symbolic nature of things that you can do. You can wear a button, you can wear a bracelet, you can wear an earring, you can wear little, and apparently this happens a lot, and I didn't see it as much, and then I started to notice it. It's like, spotting the bear in the woods and then the bear is following you everywhere, is the old Lewis Black joke. But you start to see the signals when you start to know that they're out there. And, that can be even a subtle way to just make sure that, someone's in the room with you and those types of things. So you can wear that little pin or something, and it can be a good bat signal to someone else who might be in a similar position but might not know that you're there.
Exactly. And I think this is a situation that actually we are starting to see more of it. So it wasn't even necessarily a bear in the woods. Like I just remember going to Pride, maybe it's 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and not necessarily seeing a single bi flag. At the same time, I didn't necessarily identify with it. And so you could be right. Like I wasn't looking for it. And obviously Pride this year was different, but Pride last year, I went out and there were bi flags everywhere. And what was so cool was it was a younger generation. I'd see these teenagers who are, whatever it is, 16, 18, and they'd be draped in a bi flag or have bi painting face. And like, I'm there like crying to myself. I'm so happy seeing this and seeing the growth of the community. But like, we know more and more people are identifying as bi plus and embracing the label. And I guess I should clarify right now, when I'm saying bisexual, I mean that in an inclusive manner, whether you identify as pansexual, polysexual, but anyone who's attracted to multiple or all genders.
Right.
So bi plus, but sorry, I identify as bisexual, but you can also call me pansexual or queer, and I'd also be very comfortable with those labels as well.
Right. And I think for those who haven't heard Robin Oak speak of her definition, she sort of talks about it also doesn't have to be equal levels of attraction or even the same at any given time. It can evolve and be very fluid. And, I think that's part of the challenge of those who may not realize that maybe they are part of the community because, maybe they haven't thought about it, just as you sort of talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So we talked about sort of the in real life aspect of it. So I'm actually going to bring up an example, and we'll talk about sort of the in-person aspect of it. So one of our advocates here in Connecticut, Sherry, who's also runs a group as well in Connecticut, she's noticed that Anderson Cooper has multiple times said gay, lesbian, transgender, left out the bi. And there are other examples like that you see it online where, there might be situations where, the bisexual portion of the spectrum is left out of the commentary. So obviously in person, it's sort of a bit more personalized conversation versus a name on a screen that you may not know or maybe just sort of addressing. But do you approach things differently when you're looking at something online or see something on TV or things like that? Or do you find yourself kind of using the same toolkit?
No, I mean, you can use the same toolkit. Usually when it's IRL, it is more personal. It's usually someone, I kind of gave that talk in the way that someone is not believing I was bisexual or something like that. And that's something that more happens IRL versus that doesn't happen virtual. And virtual, what you're saying, there's just bi erasure. And I actually have not heard or have not realized that necessarily Anderson Cooper just does LGT. And that's fucking annoying. Like there's no reason for that. And I think, again, like engaging with stuff online is a nightmare, a little bit of Pandora's box, and being ready for that battle. But if I saw something like that, I would absolutely say, is there a reason why we're not including bisexual in this? I don't think you necessarily need to go 0 to 100, being like, you're being biphobic, you're not, okay, like you're being biphobic, you're purposely excluding us. But in the beginning, I think there is something to be said about potentially believing good intent, and being like, so what is going on here? And then if someone does double down, and at that point, I think you can be a little bit more assertive, being like, okay, I don't think this is fair. I think this is bi erasure. And I hate the fact, even though I still do this, I hate the fact that our validity is often based in our health disparities, where it's like, well, we need to include bisexuality because we have higher rates of depression, suicidality, anxiety than even our gay and lesbian peers, which has significantly more than straight people. We have higher rates of physical health problems, opioid addiction, drug addiction, domestic violence, sexual assault, and I do bring those up because I notice that does help in terms of getting people's attention, and especially because a lot of bisexuality is invalidated via a lack of science, which is just bullshit. But when you have that science and you have those stats, that makes it clear. Although, one thing I'm working on is not necessarily validating our existence by our trauma or by the fact that we are suffering more. I feel like that's so depressing, and we shouldn't have to be validated through that.
Right.
So it's something I'm working on, but I do know that when I'm making arguments online or in a setting, when I do bring this up, it gets harder to, you're not just arguing with my feelings. I'm feeling excluded. You're arguing now with facts, with life and death.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that when you're talking about virtual conversations too, I think it's also a little bit of, as you said, with the in real life conversations being more personal and the virtual ones being much more distant. I think it's also, you have to sort of approach it a little bit differently, in part because you just tend to get people who may just push buttons for the sake of pushing buttons. And so it's not just also this, explaining why there's bi erasure or what's gone wrong, but also dealing with the inevitable potential of someone just purposely trying to push buttons, and also just being savvy about knowing what the difference of those two is. Like it could be a accidental bi erasure where you might have an opportunity to educate versus someone who's just trying to agitate.
I'm looking, phooey. There was something today, and I should have looked at it before, that happened by Twitter, that there was I think it was Benit, something happened. Oh God, if anyone in the comments knows, there was some big drama. I saw one thing that went viral, that I don't know if it was a response to that, but it was that bisexual people should not be allowed to use the F word or the D word, so faggot or dyke, because that's something, in terms of a reclamation of the words, which is many gay men and lesbians have done. And I saw that, and today was one of those days where I'm like, I'm not going to engage with this. I did not have the mental strength, but I found that slightly ridiculous, and I do disagree with that, to be like, as we're reclaiming the word that bisexuals can't reclaim a word that, how many times have I being called a faggot for walking down the street when I'm wearing a crop top, where I'm presenting too effeminately, where I'm wearing drag. That has been a word that's been used to, ridicule, demean me. And even though at this point I still end up dating typically more men than I do women, so I'm more often in same-sex relationships, but even not, this is a word that's been hurled against me, and I take power in reclaiming that. Just because I'm bisexual and not gay doesn't mean I no longer can use it.
It's not like you're going to be like, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry, you called me this F word, but I'd like to correct you.
Yeah. And I'm actually bisexual. If someone calls you that, well, actually, I'm not. Technically, because I also still am attracted. No, like, and I saw that, and that just seemed like, when I see something like that, that's not an isolated, okay, this guy has larger issues with the bi community, clearly. It's not just like this is a one-off issue. He has some feelings and thoughts about us, clearly. And I wonder if that was what the larger thing was about. I know there was something else going on. It could have been started with that, because I did see that went viral. But there's often, it's really frustrating. I think everyone can speak to this. When I experience homophobia or biphobia from a straight person, it's more like, well, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. But then when you experience biphobia from a gay person, from someone that's supposed to be in your community and someone that's supposed to be part of this larger LGBTQ plus community that's not accepting of you, that just hurts. That's not something I can brush off the same way. And that does have a more negative effect on me. And I find that more frustrating. I'm definitely more hurt and angered and confused by biphobia within the gay community than I am from straight people who just believe that I'm gay.
Right.
And yeah, that sucks. I hate it. I forgot exactly what the question I was answering. I kind of went off on a little tangent here. But
no, it's okay. As I said, I wanted this to be more of a conversation. Actually, it's interesting because I cannot remember the advocate who posted this YouTube video, but there was someone who posted.
Jay, what the hell's his name? I know exactly what you're talking about. Who did all the questions to ask bisexual and was going around this past week.
Well, actually, this was about someone saying that community centers couldn't be trusted for the bi plus community because they spend too much time focusing on everybody else and don't create a space for the bi plus community. And I saw that video, and actually I went to our executive director, who's currently working behind the scenes. Thank you, Patrick, for producing this. And I said, we need to make sure that we're not that, and that we make sure that there are spaces for the bi plus community, whether it be the support groups, whether it be programming like this, and make sure that we just are making sure that it's out there and it's confirming. We even started a Facebook virtual group, Bisexual Plus Connecticut, so that way there could be a meeting place on Facebook where people can connect and have a safe space to communicate. In part because we were concerned that was an impression that people would have of us because of other community centers,
It's, I think a lot of the time, bisexuality is an afterthought or not even necessarily even thought of in community centers, although obviously the fact that you're doing this and people are being more mindful, because we are also making more of a stink. It really is, and my mom loves saying the squeaky wheel gets the oil, or the grease. I should probably know, she says all the time, but now we just say squeaky wheel and we know what it means.
Right.
And that stuff, that stuff absolutely happens in a way that does not necessarily make us feel welcome. Hold on, we have a question. Do you see the live comments?
I do, yes. We do have a question. So do you experience biphobia from gay men or women more? That's good. Thank you for watching. Good to see you.
Yeah. So it depends on what context you're talking about. In terms of like dating, I think I've honestly have not seriously dated a straight woman or been with like a straight woman in a while. It's all bisexual, polyamorous, pansexual women who I feel comfortable being around, and that's just a lot of because straight women don't believe that I'm bi or don't want to talk to me for being bi, and I definitely experienced biphobia from straight women in a dating context. It's almost like from gay men, I also experienced biphobia. I'm going to answer, I guess, both in a dating context, because that's for some reason why I took it there. But biphobia for men, like, it's so silly. It's almost like gay men are like, whatever, he's hot, I don't even care. Like, I just feel like, so in a dating context, I really have not run into the issue nearly as much of a gay man being not willing to date me because I am bisexual. That's happened a couple of times, and it has been an issue with some gay men that I've dated where they have felt potentially insecure or jealous, but they were still working through that and willing to date me. But from straight women in a dating context, 100% more. And it's made it to the point where I feel so uncomfortable being almost like trying to flirt with straight women, because I feel like, well, I don't know when to bring up the fact that I'm bisexual. Like, it's just like, I don't even like doing that in real life anyway. I just feel so uncomfortable. Right. I'm very lucky to kind of to have found these kind of bi and poly and pan spaces. And that's typically where I meet women for dating or for hooking up with, and same with then online dating, definitely. There are like apps like Field now, which is definitely caters more towards like pansexual, bisexual, polyamorous folks. The Twitter post saying BIPOC people can't use slurs was posted by Stream Clear. Okay, we'll go back to that in a second. I want to see what that was. But anyway, yeah, so honestly, from both gay men and women, but typically more so straight women for sure.
And obviously, unfortunately in this case, because there's two bi men on the camera and we don't have a bi woman in this particular conversation, I don't want to speak for all bi women either, but I can say from my conversations with other people who've come through the center over the years, there's definitely been challenges with a bi woman, for instance, within certain parts of the lesbian population. There's definitely certain people who do look down on it and have an issue with it. Others don't, of course, so we don't want to paint with a broad brush and just say everybody's one way or the other. And I think that actually leads to the next question that we sort of had received, which is around dating. But before we do that, do you want to go back to that Twitter?
Yeah, I just want to see what it was, and maybe if there was any. I think I kind of covered what my thoughts were on it, but let me see if someone commented something. Stream Clear.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Stream Clear. I'm fully gay and believe bisexual should be able to say the F word. You're a bisexual yourself, so I'd like you. Oh, he was bi himself. I think that was maybe a part of it too.
Interesting.
But it got 26,000 likes. That's a ton.
Wow.
That's multiple tons. This is coming from a bisexual. Stop trying to claim a slur so badly. Historically, the F word was used against gay men to demean men of their masculinity. The D word was used against lesbians for their lack of attraction to men. His reasoning, yeah, I don't want to get into this because I would do this for a while, but I just disagree with them, and I think I explained clearly why.
Before we move on, so one of the things that Zachary and I talked about before we got live was talking about online resources being a really important aspect of the Bi+ community coming together. One great resource in our area is the New York Area Bisexual Network on Facebook. So there's definitely a number of good resources aside from our own group, Bisexual Plus Connecticut. And just want to make sure that those of you who are watching who may not be familiar with them know that they're out there. So if you're looking to meet others and to share resources, things like books, meetings, programs, so forth, both of those are going to be excellent places to start looking.
Yeah.
So going back to dating is one of the questions that we had received was relating around navigating dating apps. And so the person who wrote, and happened to be female in this case, and said that she was challenged when using dating apps because in part, if she marked herself as bisexual, there was certainly a lot of pushback and she was having trouble finding people who were accepting of bisexuals. Their profiles would say no bisexuals and that sort of thing. If they changed their filters to say lesbian, they would get a lot more hits, right? And so she doesn't want to lead in with it saying that she's lesbian because that's not her true identity, but at the same time she feels like she's forced to make these sorts of decisions if she wants to be able to have more opportunities to connect with people. And she was just wondering what ideas or thoughts around that you might have.
So it depends where she lives. But if she lives in a decently populated area, I always see kind of putting bisexual on my profile as a silver lining, in a way where it's like, no matter what, you get significantly less matches, and that's what's going to happen. But the people that do match with you either are clearly open to you being bisexual, whether they're gay or straight. And I feel like often being open to being bisexual, to being someone that's bisexual, is honestly a proxy for other good characteristics that I look for in a person. Someone who's open-minded, able to think critically, done their research, not necessarily a jealous or insecure person. You also end up finding more other bisexual people. When you put your bi on your profile, other people will see that, and maybe they didn't feel comfortable putting bi on their profile. So yeah, you are going to get significantly less matches, 100%. But I feel like the matches you get will be better, and especially when you're often, I know my female friends who are on whatever it is, Tinder, Bumble, or any app, and you're often just flooded with, matches anyway. So right. I think it would be a good filter to have. If you live in a really small area, or let's say you've had bisexual on your profile and you've been doing it for a month and you've just gotten 0 matches. I mean, at that point, then no, you don't have it there. Just kind of from a practical perspective, you end up identifying as, I don't think you have to necessarily identify as lesbian, but you don't say that you're bisexual on your profile, and then upon meeting a guy or a girl and you get to know them a little bit better, you can say that you are bisexual. Always the risk you run there is the fact that they might reject you at that point, and that kind of sucks, which is why I try to say it always earlier in a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be then listed on your profile. It doesn't have to be within the first day or two of texting, but I think I think it usually is better to say it sooner than later, because it really sucks. It really sucks, when someone rejects you for that.
Absolutely. So here's a question that came in on chat that we just got. Have you given any thought to the Supreme Court's recent ruling on LGBTQ plus workplace discrimination and the fact that bisexuals were not included? The language was homosexual and transgender.
My understanding was the language is not necessarily included. They didn't, by that I mean they didn't use the word bisexual. However, bisexuals were still protected by this ruling. That was the understanding that I received. So because we were still covered in terms of sex and gender, because our attractions are still based off of that. So that was my understanding, that we are actually included. Okay, thank you, Carl. Bisexual.
I love this conversation aspect to it because there's a lot of good input coming in.
Yeah. So Carl said, and thank you for clarifying, bisexuality was mentioned in a footnote that clarified that the ruling was regardless of sexual orientations, referencing heterosexuality, homosexuality, and bisexuality. So yeah, that is what I was saying, but also just the fact that, like, even the language, Pete, right? We have that, and that's just shitty too. They clearly forgot us, and we are literally a footnote. We are literally a footnote. We are a literal afterthought. So it's good that we are included in the actual ruling, right? I think that is important, but I think really this just speaks to the fact that especially straight people often don't include us. Especially in stuff, they really just think of things as gay and straight, or they think of homosexual and transgender in this setting. But yeah, I think it really just speaks to that. And thank you, Carl, for clarifying.
Love that. So I think that this kind of this next question that we received, can move it on so I'm not like staring off into space, that came in kind of leans into some other things that we talked about earlier, but heads in a direction that we haven't gone yet. So with many bi plus people saying orientation is only somewhat important to their overall identity, it can be one of multiple aspects, obviously, and some bi people saying they don't always feel welcome at gay events. How important is it that there are community spaces specifically dedicated for bi plus people? And building on that, what's the best way to form a community?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to look at that question one more time right there.
I messaged it to Zach before we started because it's a lengthy question. So
yeah, hold on. So I'm looking it over. I think there are two different things going on in this question. The first part is, how important is it to have spaces specifically dedicated for bi plus people? And what is the best way to do that?
Right.
I think, in short, very, very important. I think that's something that we have been struggling with as a bi community for a while now. I think right now there are a lot of great kind of virtual spaces, and like, honestly, a place that's really good and like inclusive is a place like Reddit, like, of all places. But that's not great, the fact that it only exists there. I have found specifically my kind of bi plus community in sex spaces and sex clubs. And so, like, I'm part of New Society for Wellness, NSFW, which is this big sex club in New York. I sometimes even host parties for them. And with there, a lot of the people there are bisexual, pansexual, and I felt really included in this space, and also polyamorous, sex positive, kink positive. But also, that can't be the only type of in-person space we have, because obviously that's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to, like, just because you're bi, you don't want to have to, like, the only place to go to bi people is at a sex club. That's ridiculous. So I think it is very important. I know I feel really affirmed in a bisexual space. I often know that I don't feel welcome in straight spaces. I don't feel welcome in gay spaces. And I know that there are more bi groups, even the live comments. A great group in New York actually is New York Area Bisexual Network. And I know of them, and they are a great group, and they do very cool events. And I think one thing we need to focus on too, and one thing I know, when I initially came out, I was living in Boston at the time, and the bisexual groups that I would try to do meetups with were all bisexual support groups.
Right.
And I actually didn't want a support group. I just wanted to meet and have fun with other bi people. But yeah, I think we need to continue creating more of these spaces. I think there's been challenges, but I think as more of us start identifying as bisexual, I think we're going to feel more comfortable going and creating these spaces. Another aspect of the question, I think, was with many bi people saying orientation is only somewhat important to overall identity. Those are the people who are not on this chat or anything. I feel like most bi people I know say orientation is definitely an important part to their overall identity, and that's why we crave for these bi plus spaces.
It's interesting because, like, we've had our executive director and myself have talked about this a few times. We've had an art program going on at the center for a couple of years. We've had a number of bi plus artists that haven't actually put that very far forward in their identity when they have their bios and things like that. And so when people come to us and say, what are you doing for the bi plus community? And we start talking about that, they're like, well, I didn't know that. And it's in part because the artist didn't really want to put that as the sort of part of the description. And so I think that's where I think some of that comes from, is that, maybe you're a person of color first, and maybe that's the most important aspect of your identity.
Gotcha.
So it could be a different part of your identity that's kind of what you focus on first, and that's obviously a part of you as well. But it's an interesting question about this. When we were going to move our group into a sort of a more of a support model, the feedback that I got from everybody was they preferred it as sort of just a chit-chat group and a sort of a way to congregate and meet up and potlucks and that kind of stuff. And so sort of what you were describing and what you were looking for was actually the feedback we got, which is why we did not evolve our social to be a complete support group. We do have that aspect if the conversation goes that way, but it's not designed to necessarily be a support group.
Yeah.
And that's in part because of that. The other aspect is, since everybody's been virtual, it's easier to get to these meetings. Connecticut's not a big state, but if you wanted to drive from one end to the other, it's still a 2-hour drive. And so you may not be able to put that time commitment in for a 2-hour meeting to drive, 4 hours round trip. So I think one thing that's been great about the virtual aspect of things is not only that it's accessible anytime, but also you can attend meetings in any location, as long as you have the internet connection and the ability to dial in. Or the phone connection in this case.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's one thing. I don't know. I've been going to more, I just know, like, book readings than I have ever before, just because I'll see something's going on and I can just pop on in for a half an hour and then I can leave. So definitely accessibility to more bi spaces is potentially possible right now because everything is virtual, which is pretty cool.
So while we're speaking about resources, there's one I wanted to share from one of our group members. And you mentioned books, actually, which is why I thought of it. But there's actually an annual awards that are given out for bi plus authors and books. And I'm just pulling it up to make sure I get this right. It's biwriters.org. So the Bi Writers Association. And they just announced on the 19th, so about 2 weeks ago, their winners for 2020. which was for the 2019 books. And so they cover everything from fiction, nonfiction, romance, mystery. And so there's like a lot of different types of poetry, a lot of different types of books that are in there. So if you are a reader or you like certain types of material, you just want to find Bi Plus literature, there's the website right there. They have all of the awards going back. Part of the challenge I've seen with Bi Plus writing is, unfortunately, the books go out of print kind of fast. And so many times you're sort of scrambling to find a used copy because they just don't stay in print. And so I think it's great that we have kind of a fresh list of probably books that are all still in print and affordable and easy to get.
Yeah, that's awesome. And hopefully, I just got a literary agent, which I'm very excited for. So when my our manifesto comes out, there will be a hell of a bisexual book for everyone to read.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's a nice little carrot to dangle for everybody to look forward to.
Yeah, it'll take a moment at this point, but it'll be there sometime 2021. So that's exciting.
So let's shift into your writing for a bit and just talk about that. And by the way, I want to remind before I move on, if you post a question into our chat, if you're watching live, and we still have about 15, 20 minutes on the conversation, feel free to submit them. We'll definitely aim to address them before we finish. So feel free to continue submitting those questions. We love them. But let's talk about your men's health column first, since that's sort of pretty prominent at being men's health after all. Tell us a little bit about what your goal is, because when I read sort of your mission statement for it, it is a little bit different than your standard advice column, which I thought was nice in terms of the questions you're soliciting and so forth.
I think one thing I love is how, I don't speak on behalf of men's health, I just want to make that clear, but like men's health at least really encourages me right now to be myself and to be queer inclusive. And if you look at the column, you'll see that like half of the questions I'm answering involve queer men, whether it's directly bisexual men or men confused about their sexuality or just a gay man in their relationship. And I love that men's health. That's something that could not have been done at men's health or wasn't being done at men's health 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm the first one to be doing it now. You know what I mean?
Right.
But also, I think in my advice column, and what separates me a little bit from the rest of the people is I feel very comfortable in interjecting myself and my experiences. Usually, it's like, it's almost people want to keep themselves out of it. And especially, whenever I ask a therapist for advice, and I think that was frustrating, like as an expert, I always try to get like, expert opinions for the sex column. And therapists always are so nervous to kind of give actionable advice without necessarily knowing everything, or will always be like, communicate with your partner. And what I'm able to do is be like, hey, this actually happened to me, or something similar happened to me. This is how I went through it. And here's some actionable advice that's a little bit more detail oriented. And here's how to communicate with your partner. So that's one thing I've really been enjoying and seeing, just like, I now I've only done, it's maybe like 8 weeks, 9 weeks. So it's relatively new, but seeing all the questions that come in, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be able to do this and to answer really queer, bisexual, and different types of questions that I have not seen answered elsewhere.
That was, and it's that last point that I actually saw you write somewhere that I thought was really interesting. Your goal was to try to approach questions that might not get answered elsewhere, and to try to make sure that different types of topics were coming up than what you would find in your Dear Abby or your Carolyn Hacks or whatever you read, depending on your generation. Because, obviously that means that you're able to represent different types of situations or people that otherwise wouldn't be represented.
Absolutely. And I think that's definitely what I'm trying to do. And also just for the sake of being interesting, I want to represent, voices that aren't being heard. But also, it's boring representing the same voices over and over again, answering the same sex questions over and over again. We need something different.
Right, exactly. So we have this is a little bit of lengthy one, so we'll read this out. So if I could, I wanted to add that as a bi woman, that I've had the regular experience of becoming an object of sexual excitement by straight men when they find out. Even as part of a professional setting, I'd had a male colleague make a comment about how my male partner must be so excited to have a bi girlfriend. Needless to say, it is a common misconception that bi equals promiscuous. Now that's a point we didn't get to yet, but it's one that I almost feel like is a table stakes comment that needs to be sort of addressed regularly in the Bi Plus conversation, which is that bi doesn't mean that you're necessarily polyamorous, or I love your term, ethical non-monogamy, right? Although that's certainly acceptable if that's where you are, but it doesn't mean that is who you are.
And it's just, I mean, bi women get so sexually objectified. And like, I mean, on dating apps, often it just kind of sounds like hell with always being propositioned for a threesome and always trying to be the sexual unicorn. And this got like, yeah, just being fetishized in such a gross setting and in a professional context. It's so inappropriate to say that, yet still straight men feel comfortable, I feel like, commenting on this. And it's still this idea. Yeah, it's, sorry, I'm like so frustrated that I know this happens. Of course, this happens all the time. And Hannah, I'm sorry you had to deal with this, but that's just so frustrating.
Yeah. It's definitely just indicates how much work there still is to do, unfortunately. Yeah. It always boggles my mind when I hear about these types of things happening in workplaces. Even now, I just know how many courses I've been through, conversations, expectations. People know better, and yet for some reason it still happens, and it's just very frustrating.
Yeah. Sorry, go for it.
No. That was the end of my thought.
No, I was gonna say one thing I always try to make hopefully clear in my writing and what I do is making room for everyone in the bisexual community and not necessarily pushing this like I once wrote a piece that was titled, I think, I'm a bisexual stereotype whose job is to dispel bisexual stereotypes. It's just like, I am polyamorous, slutty, but like, and I really made a distinction in the piece between the things that were actually socially acceptable and things that were not. So the things that were like, okay, there are these stereotypes. There's nothing wrong with being polyamorous. There's nothing wrong, with being slutty, but there is something wrong with cheating on your partner and believing that I'm more likely to cheat on you. First of all, whenever I see those comments, I'm just like, men cheat. Do you not think straight men cheat? Do you not think gay men cheat? Like, men are trash and they cheat, but I often see like, oh, bisexual men are more likely to cheat. But I really tried to make it clear that like, okay, there's some stereotypes that are harmful. Well, all of them are wrong because they're stereotypes. But then some of them are inherently, I'm more likely to spread STIs or HIV or something like that because I'm bisexual. It's like, okay, no, that's actually very wrong and harmful.
Right.
But I also make sure that still trying to create space for bisexual people who are monogamous, bisexual people who are not slutty, bisexual people who are happily married to their partner and have been for forever, and really making sure to not put one type of bisexual person over the other. Right. I feel like sometimes there's this push sometimes even among bi activists to kind of push like, okay, no, like we're more monogamous and that's what it is. Please stop calling us polyamorous and slutty. And then I'm like, no, we can be polyamorous and slutty. That's okay. So making sure that one type of bi narrative isn't on a pedestal or considered superior than another.
Well, right, and you wouldn't say that about necessarily straight people either. You wouldn't say that like you must be monogamous or you must not be monogamous. Like every single category has pockets of people who are either one group or a different group. It's not that because of your sexuality you are suddenly these other 7 things. It's not necessarily right at all.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, since we've kind of gone there, let's talk about ethical non-monogamy for just a moment.
Sure.
And that's what you're kind of talking about, right? It's like cheating is certainly not good, but you can have a relationship with
cheating is not good. Yeah, that's my official stance on that.
Right, yeah, it's no bueno. But you can have a relationship with someone. You can choose as a couple to make decisions that allow for other decisions to be possible. And I think you've written about this pretty extensively in your past, where I think what I've read was you were in a relationship where you agreed to have, there were basically no boundaries around certain things that you could then, but you both agreed to that to begin with. And so therefore it wasn't cheating, it was, I guess that's where the ethical non-monogamy definition comes from, but you probably could explain it better than I'm doing right now. I'm stumbling over my words here.
No, ethical non-monogamy just means you come to an agreement with your partner that you're not going to be monogamous in some setting. And I think one misconception that happens often is people assume you can't cheat if you're being ethically non-monogamous, and the answer is you 100% can. So if you agree to certain rules in your relationship, and it can be that we only have sex together as a unit, or it can only be with people we don't know. It can only be once. It can only be no kissing. It can only be, you can't have sex in our bed, or I have veto power for you to not have sex with this person, or you can't fall in love with this person. And so there are a million different shapes and forms an ethical non-monogamous can take. And, especially with STIs too, where sometimes it is, you can be fluid bonded, meaning that you only have condomless sex with your partner, and then sex with condoms with other people. But if you don't do that, then you are cheating, in some variation of it. And, I was in a relationship. I've been in various ethically non-monogamous relationships, one that are polyamorous, meaning I lived with my boyfriend, his wife, his wife's girlfriend, and his wife's boyfriend. And I'll be honest with you, that was a lot. That was a lot for me. I'm still waiting to pitch it as a sitcom at some point because it really feels like it's threes, fives company.
20 version of Friends. There you go.
Yeah, but it was and with us, and we made it work, and we were open to things, and we were constantly having different communication about where we feel now a month from now might not be where we feel 6 months from now. So I think it's important in every ethical non-monogamous relationship to have ongoing conversations about how your relationship would look. And spoiler, that's also great for monogamous relationships too, not even necessarily in an ethical non-monogamous context, but always just being just because we were doing something 3 months ago doesn't mean I want to keep doing this.
Right.
In a way, ethical non-monogamy, in order for it to be successful, you have to be honest and communicative. But I often try to help my friends who are monogamous or for the sex column being hey, here's actually what monogamous people can learn from polyamory, because we have figured out some things about communication, time management, dealing with jealousy, dealing with difficult talks about sex and STIs. That a lot of straight people not straight people, a lot of monogamous people don't necessarily address because they don't feel as if they have to, but they definitely should.
Yeah, I think the communication part of it, and again, going back to the point, it's cheating when you break the boundaries of what you've agreed to. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to, is that you're in a partnership with someone, and you're the relationship is a partnership of all sorts of different things, and part of it's also agreeing to things as a couple, and if you can't agree to things as a couple, there's a problem. So it's rule number one in my mind. But once you cross that boundary, it's very difficult to you've rung the bell, you can't unring the bell. We had another thing come in the chat just now, and I definitely want to make sure we bring it up. So even though there are gay clubs along with your usual clubs, do you think there should be more bi clubs around instead, or as well as of clubs that sometimes have a bi night, still allowing straight and gay people in, of course?
I wrote an article 5 years ago just being why aren't there bi clubs? And hopefully the way we're going to get them is either a bisexual person will start one, or bi nights just become so successful right now. So even though it's once a month, all of a sudden they have a gajillion people going, so they do it twice a month, then it's once a week. And before you knew it, they end up opening another club. So right now, I will say, if there's any bi night, go and attend, and make sure all your bi friends go and attend, because this is how we get more. Clubs are, all they care about is money. All they care about is you buying drinks. I remember when I was going to write an essay for Out magazine years ago, I think it was one of the last lesbian bars shut down in Los Angeles. It might have been the last one. I don't remember exactly. But I was gonna call them up, and I'm like, well, this sucks. Why are lesbian bars being shut down? It shows that there's a priority among gay men in the community and not lesbians. And then I reached out to them, and they're literally the response is lesbians don't buy drinks. They'll buy a few PBRs a night, versus I turn this into a gay bar. Gay men will buy 9 martinis and 15 vodka sodas. So, that was a but that was oftentimes what ends up happening, why things turn into a gay space as opposed to, in this case, a lesbian space. But it just speaks that gay bars, they don't care if it's gay, they don't care if it's lesbian, they don't care if it's bi, they just want to make money.
Yep.
So I think if we just show that there's a demand for it and that we will go and spend our money, they will do it. Yep. But yeah, I think bi clubs would be something that would be awesome. I would absolutely love to see that. I think that would be so cool, and I know I would be there every single weekend.
And the other thing to point out, too, is that a lot of times bars, when these events come out, it's not necessarily that the bar is generating these ideas, it's promoters that are coming to them with these ideas.
Yeah.
It's hand in hand. So they'll take outside ideas and work with outside people to promote an event together. And if it's successful, they'll keep working together. I know of one bar in Connecticut, the Shea, which has a number of outside organizations and it's been a LGBT bar for 40 plus years. And they've got a kink night. They've got, different drag nights. They've got, all sorts of different themed nights that are drawing in different parts of the community. And part of the reason why that happened was that they partnered with different people in the community and put these events together. But they didn't put together a bi plus specific night necessarily, which means that there might be the opportunity for someone to go under and pitch it and try it. And if it's successful, it'll just, as you said, it'll become a regular thing. And so
what we try to do once bars eventually become a thing again. Yeah, that's
right.
what we try to do.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the bigger problem, and we're seeing this happen, is there are pressures on LGBT plus bars. They are struggling in many places. Some of them are having standard business issues, like their landlords are just raising the rents beyond a level that they can support.
Yeah.
Others are more just community support is lagging. So that's the other aspect of it too. If you want to make sure these spaces exist for our community as a whole, and we have ways to bring these events in and have successful nights, not only can we have a successful night for us, but we can also support these bars and make sure they don't go away.
Exactly.
So I think we've got a couple of minutes left. So let's just review one more time where they can find you and your writing, because I think it's, for those who may not have had a chance to read you yet, I think they're going to want to now.
Yeah.
Website.
Honestly, well, it's my website. You can see my readings up there, but I don't necessarily update with new articles there. The best place to follow me on social media for sure. So Twitter and Instagram are the best. And my handles for that is Zachary Zane and then an underscore at the end of it. So Zachary Zane underscore.
Very cool. Yeah, and then also don't forget that with the advice column, you can send questions in there too. So that might be another way to get your questions answered.
Yeah.
Patrick's so quick, fast typer. There's the handle for social media, so you can follow Zachary. And here in Connecticut, we also have resources. As we mentioned, we have the Bisexual Plus Connecticut group that you can join us at. We have all sorts of conversations. We pass around memes. We let people know about various things going on. We have our Bi Plus Social and Support group every fourth Saturday at 1:30. You can email us for more info. Right now, it's meeting virtually on Zoom, so we send that information out. And then, yeah, just keep an eye on our calendar too, because we have our Pride's in the fall, so I'm sure we'll have some more Bi Plus specific programming for that, and then dotted throughout our calendar as well. So first off, thank you so much for joining us, Zach. Really appreciate this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Absolutely, and thanks for all of you who are watching, whether live or the playback. We appreciate you in either form. And be sure to just email us and let us know what you want to see in the future, because we'd love to have more conversations like this, and maybe we'll have Zach back. Last thing, we publish Centerline, so you can see Centerline in my email address, which is our bi-monthly magazine. In our July issue, which will be coming out in a couple weeks, we are going to have a Bi Plus resource list. We've been sort of doing one for each portion of our community as we go through the issues, and so the Bi Plus one will be up. We'll have some Zach links in that as part of it, but a whole bunch of resources that you can also look forward to coming up in July. So with that, thank you so much. Thanks again, Zach. Thanks, Patrick, for manning the production booth tonight, and we'll see you all very soon at another Pride Center meeting. Thanks, everyone.